much, Jonas, for giving us time today. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
How long has it been that you are off and on part of Pakistan, sort of?
Yeah, no, so I think the first time I actually was deeply involved or exposed to Pakistan was through an event in Singapore back in 2014 or 15, where a few companies visited.
Okay.
And then I got invited by Plan 9 actually in Lahore to visit.
Okay.
And so that was my first trip. And I guess I was very impressed, and it felt like a country that was very much misunderstood. So that kind of intrigued me. And so ever since I've been coming quite regularly. So in the early years, maybe once or twice just to keep in touch. But then over the years, obviously have been spending more and more time here.
And when was that?
Well, obviously, when we did the Bykea investment and I joined the board back in early 2019, from that point on, it ended up being about a week a month. Okay. During COVID, obviously, a little bit different, but
that was a whole different story.
Exactly, but yeah, a lot of time now in Pakistan.
How's your relationship with the region generally, like personally?
Listen, I don't have a relationship with a region. I have a relationship with people.
With people, okay.
And the people that I've met here, there are many people who have been very open and have been very. I think I enjoy relationships with people that go deeper than just the shallow "hello, how are you" and goodbye and on to the next one. And so I think what's been very impressive for me or very interesting is how open a lot of people I've interacted with here are towards the opportunities, the good, the bad, the ugly of a country, and the spirit and the hustle and the appetite to just do something and to try and create something is, as an entrepreneur at heart, something that I also really appreciate, and therefore I'm very keen on just seeing how I can help support in whatever way possible in that journey of creating something.
Pakistan generally has been in a struggling economy, and it has been unpredictable, especially because of the political changes that have happened over the past few months. And what potential do you see in the economy considering the socio-political situation right now?
I think the reality is that for startups, any startup is always in turmoil and is always very messy, and any environment that is in turmoil is, to a certain extent, part of what creates opportunity as well. The reality is, for any entrepreneur who starts their journey, they need to be expecting this to be at least 5 to 8, probably more like 10 years to build something very meaningful. So from that perspective, all of the noise that happens day in, day out almost becomes a little bit irrelevant. The question really is, what are the things that are going to hold true 10 years from now that are true today, and how can you optimize and design and provide those kind of services? If we look at Bykea, people move today, people moved 10 years ago, and people will move 10 years from now. Now the methods may change slightly. So when Bykea first started, there was no motorbike taxi culture in Pakistan, but of course people were moving, and so therefore building a business around this value proposition makes a ton of sense. But that's kind of where I guess good companies figure out how to kind of operate in these environments that on the one hand are very volatile, but on the other hand serve a mission that is very important and that doesn't change and independent of how the circumstances are.
Absolutely. I agree completely. And the learning and relearning and adapting to the environment is what we'll have to figure out.
100%.
Yes. So the last few years have been tremendous investment and funding wise for Pakistani startups. And so what are your thoughts on the local startup ecosystem? And what do you think, how is it seen globally?
So it's funny because I think it's changed completely since I first started coming to Pakistan. Nobody cared about Pakistan globally, no investors, and everybody was wondering what the heck I'm doing here. But even back then, certain companies did get funding. It was very, very difficult, but Bykea did get funding at the end of the day. Now, in the last 12, 18 months, that obviously has changed dramatically. Suddenly, a lot of people globally, especially from Europe and the US, less so from Southeast Asia, but a lot of people have been looking very carefully at this market and started doing a lot of investments, which generally is good news. Now, I think what we as an ecosystem need to be careful with is that we need to produce winners. We need to produce success stories. And in startups, a success story is not a fundraising or a next fundraising. In startups, success means a big profitable company, a exit, an IPO. And I think from that perspective, it's still very early days. So what we as an ecosystem need to make sure is that we create companies that grow, that develop not just this early stage of talent, but also people who know how to go from 50 to 100 to 200 to 500 to 1,000 employees, if we use that proxy, but also revenue from 10,000 to 100,000 to a million to 10 million to 100 million revenue. And that is where, I guess, especially in these times where globally investment is drying up very, very quickly, it is, again, just one more factor of this instability that you were mentioning earlier on, where startups will need to figure out how they can navigate that.
Yes, absolutely. That's the sustainability part that we have to focus on instead of just finding capital and investments.
At the end of the day, our goal, any company's goal, needs to be to build the best possible business.
Sure.
And the capital can help that, but it always has to be about building the right business, not about attracting as much capital as possible.
Where do you see Bykea in all of this? Where is it standing? What's its potential?
Listen, I'm obviously heavily biased, but I strongly believe that Bykea has the potential to be one of those companies that really helps transform Pakistan and helps to grow this digital economy in Pakistan. And if you think about it, in other countries like in Indonesia, you have companies like Tokopedia, Gojek, Traveloka, 4 or 5 companies which have been around for 10 years and which now have become local big billion-dollar enterprises. In Pakistan, we're still much, much earlier. There is very, very few companies that locally have grown to significant scale. But we will have to produce these national champions. And it's obviously a bit ironic for me as a foreigner to be saying that. But I strongly, strongly believe that localization in markets like Pakistan, which are so big, they deserve local companies. And that's how you're relevant and how you get the customer love. And so I think that also means understanding where is the majority of the potential. So it's not just about serving something to the top of the pyramid, the 100,000 people who already are anyways relatively well served. It is about how do you do something for the 60 million people in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, for the 100 million people in urban Pakistan, for the 220 million people across the entire country. How do you really go and do something that creates value for that middle class? Yes. And I think that's for Bykea also one of the things that excites me most. Replacing, if we talk about mobility, for example, replacing somebody's air-conditioned SUV car ride with a bike taxi trip, sure, that's not bad, but helping somebody who otherwise has no way of getting on time to a certain important appointment, who is stuck in the bus for 20 rupees, but 2 hours, being able to get somewhere on time for 120 rupees, that time when he really needs to be there. That's this transformation of consumers' lifestyle. And likewise for our partners, getting those extra $30, $40, $50, $60 income a month by working a few hours on the side of your main job. That is what really starts creating this change and where I see the opportunity and potential for something like Bykea.
The shine in your eyes while you're talking about the impact that the company is trying to create, that's amazing. And that's promising.
I think part of my unfair advantage, if you want to call it that way, is I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in Vietnam. I've seen it happen in Indonesia. It's happening. These companies are commonly accepted to be the ones that have transformed the country. And I see it starting to happen in Pakistan, of course. We still have a very long way to go, but it's not impossible.
True.
So, and somebody will have to do it, so.
Why not us?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, considering whatever we have been so far, what's in the pipeline for the company?
The key for Bykea will be to continue to focus on how can we serve both the customer and our partners better? How can we be relevant? How can we make sure that they continue to have the mobility services that they need? How can we make sure that that small merchants continue to be able to sell more by getting those deliveries through Bykea, whether it is a restaurant who needs to fulfill orders, whether it is, and we talk about food, everybody in Pakistan loves food, but food doesn't just mean restaurants, it also means the lady at home cooking nihari and selling it through her Instagram page. How can she actually be connected to the rest of the market by fulfilling such orders? The chapal, small producer, how can he sell all of that? So I think for Bykea, the next focus is to make sure that, of course, in mobility, we keep adding all of those, offering those services and making sure that this whole delivery, creating the economy, growing the economy in a market like Pakistan where everybody is hustling and trying to make ends meet. How can we as Bykea make sure that we play our supporting role, facilitating role for people to get that incremental income?
Last question for the day. On the global recession, we are observing that within startups, layoffs are happening, realignment of business operations is happening, and that is kind of putting pressure generally on the startups and the industries. How do you see this affecting the fundings or capital or investment coming in the future?
So it's definitely going to be much more difficult to raise new investment rounds in the next couple of months. Because obviously investors are becoming more cautious, a lot of turmoil in the markets, and last year's valuations and some of the investments made were maybe a little bit too exuberant and a little bit overexcited. Having said that, strong companies will continue to attract investment, and also having existing strong backers and investors who are committed to companies executing well are likely going to continue to double down on their existing companies, because for better or worse, back to the earlier point, it is a 10-year journey to build big transformational companies. And no matter what the global recession is going to be right now, it's not going to last for 10, 20, 30 years. So after the winter, you will have spring and you will have summer again. And so therefore, even if you look historically, the Amazon, the Googles, a lot of these companies were born in very difficult times. But I do think that companies need to look very carefully at how can they be more efficient, how can they make sure that they really treat every dollar it is their own dollar, but they need to make sure they get the most value out of that dollar, because what do investors, the word investment itself already says it, it's supposed to lead to something. You're supposed to build something based on that. And that's where we will need to make sure as entrepreneurs and operators that every single dollar that we spend is very carefully thought through and creates that value.
And I believe that brings us back to sustainability and brings us back to, putting more effort in growing or, building the business itself.
Absolutely.
Okay. So thank you so much, Jonas. It was lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have you on the series again.
Sounds good. Would love to. Thank you very much.